Welcome. I am Oiza Adaba. Thank you for joining us today where we're discussing women and leadership. We're having a conversation with Julia Gillard and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. While women in leadership roles are on the rise, women still make up less than 10% of national leaders worldwide and fewer than 7% of Fortune 500 company CEOs. Moreover, behind these eye-opening statistics lie a pattern of unequal access to power and direct and indirect obstacles to success. As a result of their broad experiences in the world, on the world stage of politics, economics, and global non-profits, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Brookings non-resident distinguished fellow and former finance minister in Nigeria, and Julia Gillard Brookings non-resident distinguished fellow and former Prime Minister of Australia, have strong ideas about gendered treatment of leaders. In their new book, Women and Leadership, Real Lives, Real Lessons, Gillard and Okonjo-Iweala tease out what is different for women in leadership through conversations with some of the world's most powerful and interesting women. They speak honestly and freely. In this book, they interviewed quite a few women such as Hillary Clinton, Jacinda Ardern, and they talk about their ideas and their stories surrounding their positions and their male colleagues. This conversation is hosted by the Center for Universal Education and the Africa Growth Initiative. And with that, we'll hand you over to the Brookings president, John Allen, to start this candid conversation.
Thank you for that terrific introduction, and you set the stage very well for our interview today. And for those of you who I have not met, I'm John Allen. I'm the president of the Brookings Institution, and I hope to meet you all at some point. Now, in honor of Women's History Month, it is truly a great pleasure for us today to have the former Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, and the current Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. So thank you both for being here with us this morning. Here in the United States, it's this morning. It's this afternoon for Ngozi, and I'm sorry, former Prime Minister, for the hour that you are in. You are awake in Adelaide. But we're so grateful that you could all join us. So, what gave you the idea to write this book? Were you ultimately hoping to inform and inspire future women leaders, or convey the hard realities of just how much progress is needed for women in leadership today? Ngozi?
Well, yes, thank you so much, John, and it's really a pleasure, and we're proud to be, well, I should say I am proud to be a distinguished fellow. I'm sure that Julia is as well, of Brookings. It's been a wonderful experience. Julia has articulated some of the reasons, but it's true that as we went to various meetings and conferences internationally, we each had our experiences being the first woman to be in public service in a very perhaps difficult position. And we were talking to each other about the experience we had and thought it would be good to capture this in some kind of form on paper. And then we thought, look, there are a lot of women around the world who seem to be having some problems. There was Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, there was Madame Park in Korea, there was Hillary, and we were asking ourselves, why are all these things happening? What is the experience of these women with being women leaders in such prominent positions, and how did they get them? What did they have to deal with? So we thought, well, perhaps it would be good to talk to them and add their experiences, or we should add our experience to the experience of these wonderful women and share with other women that leadership journey, what it is like, and what happens when you actually get there. Are all your problems solved, or do you still have a string of doubts and challenges? What is the gendered atmosphere for you as you become a leader? So we wanted to use the research that Julia talked about. We set hypotheses that would explore some of this experience. And for me, a personal reason, it's just that as you rise, you mentor a lot of people, both women and men. And I had so many requests for mentorship to talk about my experience. I handle different things from being a leader, managing work and life. We'll come to that later. You know, people call it the work-life balance. How did you do it all? And you can only mentor so many people at a time. It takes a lot of time the way I do it. So I thought, well, if I capture my experience in a book, then that could be the handbook. You know, when people ask me, I'll just say, read this. So it was a bit of self-defense for me, really. So those are some of the reasons. Okay, let me try to be succinct, because really, John, each woman had an extraordinary story or experience that mattered so much. But let me pick perhaps on two. One is Jacinda Ardern, and the bit I want to talk about is her story about so-called work-life balance. So she's the second head of state ever to have a baby while in office with her partner. And many things that women want to know about succeeding in their careers is, how do you manage what is called the work-life balance? How do you manage your family and your career? So we put that question to Jacinda Ardern, and she told us, I don't talk about balance, because I don't balance anything. I just make it work. And I think that's the answer for many women. You never really achieve that balance. You know, there's always a skew one way or the other, either to work or to family, and you just make it work. And then the other is Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and the extraordinary story of her being married at a young age, having to leave her 4 children behind to go to school abroad when her husband got to go to the US for his education, and just the guilt she felt at taking the time to go and get an education because she had to leave her young children behind, and how that guilt followed her throughout her life. And, you know, this tells you what women have to go through sometimes. And I could relate to, because my own parents left me when I was a year old to go and study abroad in Germany. And I was left with my grandmother, which was a wonderful experience, by the way. Lots of love and discipline combined. But I know that my mother wondered all the time, you know, was this the right call or not? So women struggle with a lot of things. So those were 2 impressions.
Terrific stories. Julia, please.
Thank you, John. For me, stories that made a big impact, one in a tragic way, one in a funny way. The one in a tragic way was from Michelle Bachelet, who was the first and to date only woman to be president of Chile. Her father was a general. He was in the military, so she grew up in the elite in her society. But of course, all of that changed when there was the military coup and Pinochet came to power. Her father was imprisoned. He was tortured until his heart gave out. He died. Michelle and her mother were also briefly imprisoned. They were tortured. They fled into exile, and they actually came to Australia to find safety. And all these years later, Chile had returned to democratic structures. Michelle had served as Minister for Health, and then she was being sworn in as Minister for Defence. And what a moment when you think about that. Her father, a general, lost his life. There she is in her democratic nation becoming the Minister for Defence. And people have asked her, what did you feel in that moment? And she said to us, what I actually felt was I was saying to myself in my head, don't speak in too soft a voice, don't speak in too soft a voice, don't speak in too soft a voice, because she thought she wouldn't be taken seriously by the military community if she came across as too gentle. And it just is such a powerful story about what gender stereotyping and our internal concerns about it, what it robs us of. That should have been the thing that she was thinking about in that moment. Then at the other end of the world, when Ngozi and I met Erna Solberg, who is the Prime Minister of Norway. She came in saying, and Ngozi actually didn't know this expression, we had to talk about it afterwards. She came in saying, I've heard from my media advisor that there's this thing called resting bitch face. So now I make sure to smile as much as I can. So we had a very, very big laugh about that. With Erna Solberg, and then Ngozi and I laughing afterwards because Ngozi had not heard the expression resting bitch face. But at the other end of the spectrum, there it is again, stereotyping of women, trying to put women in pigeonholes, put labels and categorisations over them. So both those moments really stay with me. Think about how much you talk as a man. Research shows that if a group of 5 people are trying to make a decision, it's not till 4 of the 5 are women that women will get a fair share of the talking time. Or put another way, if more than 1 of the 5 are men, men will disproportionately take the time. What changes that? Potentially more women. Or the other thing that changes it is at the outset saying, we are going to make this decision by consensus rather than the loudest voices. And then that restructures the group's behaviour so everybody gets invited into the conversation. So simple tricks like that when you're convening a meeting to make sure that women aren't being excluded, their voices aren't being marginalised. Thinking about merit and how you define that. If you as a leader in your workplace, your team, define merit around presenteeism, obviously I'm talking about non-COVID days here, but the person who can be in the office at 7 in the morning and still be there at 9 at night, if that's your definition of merit, then it's got a gender skew in it, particularly if the people in your team are likely to be in the family formation stage and women still disproportionately do domestic labour. So think very deeply about how you define merit. And I think there's a special add-on to that as we take some of this virtual working with us even beyond the days of the pandemic, unless we make very thoughtful interventions as to how we will weigh merit when we're using this technology. I think the risk is the men will return to the office, the women will disproportionately choose to work from home because it's more flexible. The men will be more visible and they'll be the ones on the promotion track and the training opportunities track. So think about how you define merit. Think about who you can mentor and sponsor. And the difference between those words, mentoring is obviously a supportive relationship, but sponsoring is one where you put your brand in service of a woman. You are the one who says, the next opportunity should definitely go to this woman. I am endorsing her. She is right for it. That obviously means if you make a bad selection, that will rebound on you. So it's, really putting some skin in the game, but it is sponsorship that has the biggest results for women in terms of coming through for promotion.
That's really terrific. Thank you for that. Ngozi, please, your thoughts.
One thing I thought Julia was going to say it about the issue of stereotypes and what the media can do, because I think it will be remiss. I've just been living that experience literally. So when I became DG of the WTO, I didn't know there was an argument raging. A couple of German-Swiss papers had the title, 66-year-old grandmother takes over leadership of the WTO. I mean, I wasn't aware of what was going on until a few days after, when people took them on and called them out, men and women called them out and said, if it was a male leader, would you have 70-year-old grandfather takes over the leadership of some institution? And I was so proud, because this is what we are talking about in our book, that people called them out. I didn't even have to do anything. So what we are talking about is real, because we are living the experience day by day. The stereotypes are there, both racist and sexist. And I want to say, for everything that a woman feels, a white woman feels, in terms of sexist, women of color sometimes go through much more than that.
Thank you. That's a really important question, and it points actually to a difference between US politics and Australian politics. In Australia, you can end up Prime Minister whether or not you were born in the country, as long as you're a citizen. We find it saves a lot of arguments. Let me recommend it to you as a possible structure. But my family are Welsh. I was born in Wales in the United Kingdom, and we migrated out to Australia when I was 4 years old in 1966. And I went to the local government schools, you know, the infant school, the primary school, the high school, which were within walking distance of my family home. And fortunately for me, each of them was a great school. If my parents, who, you know, didn't know much about Australia, they'd never been here before, if my parents had bought a house in a different suburb, then my entire life could have been different, because the local government schools might have been poor quality schools. I was lucky, they picked a suburb where the schools were good. Now, it's that kind of lottery that I find so offensive, that happenstance, where you're born, which country, which city, which suburb, the impact of poverty on your life, the impact of racism on your life, of gender, that those things can predetermine life's chances in terms of whether or not a child gets access to a good quality education.
That's a copy of the book, Women and Leadership, Lessons, Real Lives, Real Lessons. Go out there and get your copy. It's out. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and Julia Gillard as authors. Great book to have. Great read, great lessons. What a great conversation to listen to. What great lessons to learn and pick up from things discussed. Some of the most successful leaders, not that are actually prone to doubt. That's interesting. You think they're so mighty sure of themselves, and Julia Gillard says it's okay to be prone to doubt, because it's a way of self-assessment of sorts, grounding yourself in your purpose and your values. It's one of the things that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala mentioned, and that way, when you look back, you'll be able to really assess yourself fairly, that you've come this far. Some of the lessons they talked about, the education being the groundwork, having parents that believe in education, and these are some of the lessons that they talked about here. Some of the tools going to move forward for young women and girls in this day and era. So it's really packed. It's fun to listen and very inspiring. And this are lessons directly from two great women, high achievers, towers of industry, and they're doing such amazing jobs around the world, and we are truly indeed proud of them as we celebrate Women History Month. I'm Oiza Adaba. Thank you so much for joining us, and next time we'll bring you more great Africans doing great things. So stay tuned to Africa Related at AfricaRelatedInc. See you next time.